I truly believe that this is the single most important character for these new movies to get right, and that's none other than... So, with James Gunn's Superman now filming, we've been getting more and more looks into the start of this new DC universe. And with glimpses of characters like Mr. Terrific, it's gotten me thinking more and more about how this universe is eventually going to handle the Justice League. Regardless of what you think about the DCEU overall, the last attempt at a Justice League movie was a whole mess. The DC universe is so wide and varied with so many amazing characters that deserve their time in the spotlight. And so with this new direction, I'm really hoping that they take their time and make the introduction of DC's premier team of heroes something special. And there's one character in particular that I think is the key to that. And so this is what I want from the DCU's Justice League. Listen, I know I've done like 3 DC videos like back to back to back. I promise it's not intentional. The set photos look great so far. Normally I'm not really one to look into leaks of any kind, and I'm not going to try and read into any of the things we've seen, but I'm loving these little glimpses we've been getting. We're finally able to get a better look at David in the costume, and he just looks incredible. Honestly, I really don't know what they were thinking making this the reveal picture when even crappy paparazzi photos are doing it better justice. James Gunn is proving he actually understands Lois Lane's character and that she should be wearing purple. But my favorite part about the set photos has actually been Mr. Terrific. I'm a big Mr. Terrific fan. He's been totally underutilized at DC for a long time, and Eddie Gathegi's costume looks spectacular. Like literally, it looks ripped right from the pages from the comics, and I love the way his mask looks. I'm interested to see how they make his T-spheres work. For those who don't know, they're these like little metal balls that float around him and respond to his commands. It's like Mr. Terrific's main gadget. And speaking of smooth, shiny balls, this video is brought to you by Manscaped. Jesus Christ. Manscaped is the global men's lifestyle brand that is revolutionizing the landscape of men's grooming, and they've garnered the trust of 10 million men around the world. Normally these ad reads are very like, ha ha ha, balls, 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 or they're like really hyper masculine, like alpha male, and neither of those things are really my vibe if you know anything about me. Because firstly, whatever's in your pants doesn't decide if you're a man or not, but also the concept of personal men's grooming has been really stigmatized, and I really appreciate how Manscaped is helping to clear that up with genuinely quality products that anyone can use. Like their Performance Package 5.0 Ultra Grooming and Hygiene Bundle, featuring the new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. They've taken grooming precision to a whole new level with their next-gen dual skin-safe blades and a new upgraded trimmer blade and interchangeable foil blade. The trimmer blade has longer, wider, rounded teeth that are still gentle on skin, while the foil blade provides a smooth, bare finish while still being safe and comfortable. You can switch between blades with ease, it's waterproof and rechargeable through USB-C, and there's a new dual temperature LED light for better visibility in harder to reach areas. But there's also their new ear and nose hair trimmer, the Weed Whacker 2.0, as well as their crop soother for post-shave relief, and their crop preserver that keeps funk at bay and helps you stay fresh all day. Personal grooming and hygiene is less about fitting into traditional gender roles or the opinions of other people, but more so about feeling clean and comfortable with yourself. And I really appreciate how Manscaped is making that more possible. Use my code or the link down in the description to get 20% off your order, plus free international shipping at manscaped.com. Thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons who are able to get all my videos early and ad-free for just $1 a month. Now, there's so many ways that you could go about building the DCU's Justice League. It shouldn't just be a collection of all the projects they've announced in some corporate synergy fest. The best Justice League rosters not only feature the fan favorites, but also allow for interesting drama and dynamics through the character relationships, as well as showcase off other characters that casual readers may not be as familiar with. The Justice League is basically a gateway into the entirety of the DC universe as a whole. You show up for Batman or Superman, but then you end up getting introduced to another character you otherwise never would have been interested in. Before the DCEU's attempt at a Justice League, George Miller was tasked to direct Justice League Mortal in 2007. The movie was fully cast and ready to start filming, but the 2007 writer's strike, combined with the success of The Dark Knight and WB not wanting to have a second version of Batman to confuse audiences, led to the movie getting shelved and eventually canceled. There aren't any high quality images, but the script eventually leaked online, and it seemed like it could have been something pretty interesting. I firmly believe George Miller is one of the most visionary directors of our time, and I would absolutely love any scenario where he comes back in some form to direct the DCU's Justice League. My ideal scenario for the Justice League in the comics is for them to do something like what Justice League Unlimited did, having basically an infinite roster of characters and each story arc cycling through different teams. That lets you have stories that are lower scale or higher scale, allow more spotlight for lesser known heroes, and show off some interesting character dynamics that otherwise wouldn't be possible. But that's something that mainly really only works in serialized formats like comics or TV. Because the movies are going to end up being these bigger projects that take multiple years, I think it's important to instead have some kind of solidified main league, sort of like how the MCU has its core Avengers, but I'd love to see other teams coexist alongside them, like the Justice League International or the Justice League Dark, or maybe the New 52's Justice League of America, which Amanda Waller created specifically to fight the main league. That was a really cool comic run that I don't see enough people talk about. It's really fun. But just because it's not a team of 30,000 doesn't mean that we're strictly limited to the standard 7 members. I actually think that 9 is the better roster size, since let's be honest, 5 slots are basically taken instantly, and it lets us have a little bit more fun with the team lineup. Also, it lets us have a few more girls on the team. Like, I'm sorry, but it's 2024. I think we're past the point of just having 2 female Justice League members, God forbid only 1. One thing that I think is important to get right in the movies is how the Justice League forms. Now, based on the casting for the Superman movie, we might very well already have a league established in some form or another, but when we eventually get to a Justice League movie on its own right, I'd like to see that movie show a newer team being formed from scratch, but not how you might expect. During phase 1 of the MCU, DCU, the Avengers were literally assembled. Sam Jackson went around the universe, popping up in credit scenes and handpicking the Avengers himself. And while I think that works for the Avengers, I don't think it necessarily works for the Justice League, and their last cinematic attempt kind of proved that. That movie had Batman going around the world and recruiting the League himself, essentially turning the Justice League into Batman's little squad of superheroes, which I never really liked. I don't really like Batman in that leadership role in the League to begin with. And I think the best way for the Justice League to form is around a common threat, like how the New 52 or the DCAU handled it. These are all characters that, with some exceptions, haven't really met before, but through the circumstances of a big invasion, they ended up crossing paths and working together before forming their official team. It's kind of corny, but it is very much the energy of like, hey, we should do this again sometime. Like I think that's kind of what's fun about the Justice League. We've already seen Starro in the movies, who was the first Justice League villain from the comics, but they could use the White Martians, maybe the Center from Darwin Cook's The New Frontier, maybe something to do with Vandal Savage, who's one of my favorite DC villains. I don't want to see anything nearly as big as Darkseid for their first outing or anything, but there should at least be some threat to the world as a whole that can't be dealt with by just one person, and that can bring the team together in a more organic way. And so what would my perfect DCU Justice League roster look like? First, let's get the obvious ones out of the way. DC's Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, the three main pillars of DC who inspire the rest of the world to be the best possible versions of themselves. There is another main pillar character further down this list, but I want to get to them later because I actually think that they're one of the most important characters to get right. Superman and Batman aren't 100% necessary to the Justice League by any means. We've seen teams without them be just as exciting, like the team from JLA Year One, written by Mark Waid and Brian Augustine and art by Barry Kitson. And I actually think it'd be really interesting to maybe wait on those characters and let some of the others shine a bit more before bringing them in. But they're the heavy hitters and Batman gets people in seats. What can he do? I've talked about it before, but I think David Cornsweet is just going to kill it as Superman. We're seeing a resurgence in Superman's popularity lately, in part thanks to shows like Superman and Lois and My Adventures with Superman, and I think he's going to knock it out of the park. There's been the sentiment that I've seen lately about Superman and the Justice League that he'll automatically win every fight, which I blame in part because of how the other movie handled it, with Superman basically showing up and soloing Steppenwolf at the end of the movie. I think it comes down to the writing and the villain that the team is facing, but there's plenty of reasons why the rest of the team could be useful. At the bare minimum, they could be fighting another team of villains like the Royal Flush Gang or the Legion of Doom. Also, like, it's not real, you know? When it comes to Batman, I have a lot of thoughts on what the DCU should do. Now, with all these set photos coming out and us getting a better look at David Cornsweet's Superman, I'm seeing a lot of people talking about how they want Robert Pattinson to just be the DCU's version of the Caped Crusader. And I get why people want that. Not only is the Batman one of, if not the, best live-action version of the character, but the stark contrast between Pattinson's Bruce and Cornsweet's Clark could be a ton of fun to see on screen. That's part of the appeal of the world's finest, that they have such differing ways of presenting themselves on the surface, but their goals and values are the same, and that's how their friendship is able to be so strong. But personally, I'm sort of 50-50 on the idea. If it happens, I'd love it, but I don't need it to be the case. I kind of like how Matt Reeves is able to have 100% creative control over his world, and that's why the movie worked so well. Introducing all this crazy stuff into that world might end up undermining what he's going for with that more grounded take. And I also don't think that Pattinson really signed on to do the whole movies and TV and animation and video games type of thing. James Gunn has said it's Matt's decision not to connect it to the greater DCU, and that he's going to respect that. Some say that two different versions of Batman might be a problem, that people are going to get confused, but I don't think that's really going to be an issue, and if they're distinct enough, people will be able to tell the difference. I know audiences are dumb, but they're not that dumb. Where Pattinson is younger and more grounded, I want this DCU Batman to be a little more experienced and have more of that swashbuckling whimsy of something like Mark Waid and Dan Moore's recent World's Finest comic, which I've been loving. A little bit brighter, more colorful and extravagant, but still clearly Batman. That's 2 Mark Waid mentions in a single video. That's how you know he's the GOAT. Rounding out the Trinity, I'm actually really interested in how the DCU is going to handle Wonder Woman. Aside from the Amazon series that's supposedly in development, we haven't heard much. James Gunn has said that there are plans for Diana specifically, but we're not really sure what that would entail just yet. Unfortunately, Wonder Woman's mainstream popularity has dipped in the past couple years. The last few movies and the casting didn't really do her any favors. But Wonder Woman is such an important and landmark superhero that it would be such a waste not to do anything with her. I would love it if they cast an actual Greek actress for Diana, but not only that, take a page out of Darwin Cook's book. He always drew Wonder Woman as being physically taller than even Superman. It was a character and a power dynamic that I absolutely adored, and if we can find the right person, that could be so cool. I have a lot of thoughts about Wonder Woman and her lore, and that could honestly be worth an entire video. It's frustrating to see a lot of Wonder Woman slander lately and people forgetting just how big of a deal she really is, and I really hope that these movies can give her some of that love. The next pick is also obvious, or it's obvious if you know anything about me, and that's Green Arrow, baby! And fuck it, Black Canary too, I need them both. Listen, it's my video, I could do what I want. All right, I know I'm biased, and I know I'm taking up 2 whole slots here, but I genuinely think Green Arrow is a must for a new Justice League roster. I have a whole video about it, but Oliver Queen is essential to keeping the Justice League honest and true, to keep even the likes of Superman on the right path, and remember that above all else, they have to watch out for the little guy. Here's a little game for you. I have 3 Green Arrows hidden in the background. try to find him. And Black Canary is also just as important. Honestly, if I had to pick, I think I'd rather have her on the team over Oliver, as crazy as it might sound for me to say that. There was a time when Dinah Lance was the best hand-to-hand fighter in the DC universe, and I want her to get that limelight again. You might say that Green Arrow and Batman on the same team is redundant, but I think that's a little surface level. Sure, they're both billionaires turned superheroes, but they have such a different skill set and outlook and attitude that they can both serve completely different purposes. Seeing the two of them butt heads is actually some of my favorite moments in comics. Also, like, not to be that guy or anything, but Green Arrow isn't really a billionaire anymore. Like, he loses all of his money like every other week. Like if you pick up a Green Arrow book, it is a 50-50 chance if he's gonna be broke or not. And it's the best. I love it. And speaking of Green Arrow, maybe I am working on something big and exciting that I've been wanting to make for a while. I don't know. The next member, someone who should be a staple of the Justice League but wasn't in the last movie for some reason, and that's Green Lantern. But that introduces the question on everybody's mind, at the heart of this video, at the crux of the argument: which Green Lantern? We're gonna be seeing Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner in Superman, a casting choice that I think is really funny because that guy was a lot of people's main pick for Hal Jordan like 15 years ago. They could use Hal Jordan, but I'd honestly rather they go with either Jon Stewart or introduce Jessica Cruz into the mix. I will go on record on this: Jessica Cruz is my favorite Green Lantern ever. The comic Green Lanterns with her and Simon Baz by Sam Humphries and Robson Rocha is such an underrated book, and I'd love to see her get more of a spotlight. She could bring a more youthful energy to the team as a sort of POV character that I think could be really fun, but I am more so leaning on it being Jon Stewart. Not only is he probably the most popular Green Lantern thanks to the DC animated universe, but also we're going to be getting that Lantern show on HBO with him and Hal, so it makes sense for one of them to come over. If we go with Jon instead of Hal, there could be an interesting dynamic between him and Green Arrow. Ollie and Hal are like best buddies. They had a whole road trip together. It was a pretty big deal. It's literally where Jon Stewart made his first appearance. And so there could be some friction with Oliver maybe comparing Jon to Hal at first before coming to an understanding. They tried doing something like that in that new Green Lantern animated movie, but I don't want to talk about that movie because it wasn't very good. A lot of people like to write Jon Stewart as being kind of the military guy, which I think is an oversimplification of his character. And so I'm hoping that series can show some more of his depth outside of that. Also, James Gunn, if you don't give Nathan Fillion that fuck-ass bowl cut, there's gonna be riots in the streets. The next character that I want to see in the DCU Justice League is Zatanna. Zatanna is one of DC's most powerful magic users. There have been rumors of us getting some kind of project involving her for years, but they never seem to get any footing. A lot of people think that Zatanna is a teen character because of the Young Justice series, but she's a prominent full-time Justice League member, and Zatanna can bring a whole new realm of magic to the league as opposed to your standard superpowers. Also, while we're on this topic, I really need to clear something up. When people say that Superman is weak to magic, they don't mean that like magic instantly takes him out in the same way that kryptonite does. They mainly mean that he doesn't have a specific resistance to magic, and so it affects him in the same way that it affects anybody else. Like Superman and Batman are both equally weak to magic. Like it's just like you're not gonna kill Superman by pulling a rabbit out of a hat in front of him. Like that's not what it means. It'd be like saying that Daredevil's weakness is bullets. Like, yeah, sure, I guess. Zatanna and Black Canary have teamed up in the past. One of my favorite comics is Black Canary and Zatanna Bloodspell by Paul Dini and Joe Quinones. Dini is best known for his work on the Arkham games and the DCAU, and this book was a ton of fun. They have a really great back and forth, and it would be really cool to see that dynamic more often as the two sisters in fishnets. Having Zatanna on the mainline Justice League could also open the doors to the Justice League Dark finally getting adapted. For so many years, the Justice League Dark has been in constant development hell, with Guillermo del Toro constantly trying to get it off the ground. And I've been hoping with Swamp Thing on the way, we can finally see something like that happen. Let me know down below if you want to see like a similar video for the Justice League Dark for like a Halloween special or anything. I don't know how well this video is going to do. The next member I'd want to see in the Justice League is Martian Manhunter. I think J'onn J'onzz is probably the most underrated member of the Justice League. Despite being a staple part of the DCAU, so many Justice League lineups don't include him for some reason. But I absolutely love him and everything he brings to the team, not just in his power set, which is really cool, but also in his empathy. It's great to have another alien on the team alongside Superman, proving that the League is more than just the Guardians of Earth. James Gunn has a ton of experience with taking aliens and creature designs from the comics and translating them to the screen, either using CGI or practical effects, and I think Martian Manhunter could look super cool. Zack Snyder's Justice League had a Martian Manhunter show up as a cameo, setting up future sequels that never got made, and also totally undermining this nice emotional moment between Lois and Martha. Like, I was really digging this scene, and then her eyes started glowing red. Like, awesome, thanks, love that. My dream Justice League movie would be something similar to Darwin Cook's New Frontier, which has always been one of my favorite DC comics. It's a must. Like, fuck, like, if you haven't read it at this point, what are you fucking doing? Finish this video and then go read that comic. That book has J'onn serve as sort of like a POV character in a lot of ways, which could be a really fun format to jump into the Justice League with. There's this great scene of him sitting in his apartment while hiding, watching TV, and shapeshifting into a bunch of different faces before landing on one he likes. Let's get Bugs Bunny for the Justice League. Come on, James Gunn, make it happen. Now, before I get to the last member, I want to include some honorable mentions, mainly because I cannot be trusted to make a full roster. Look, I already filled 2 spots with just my faves. The first honorable mention is Aquaman. I love the dude. He's great as a League member or as a recurring ally. Especially with Green Arrow, they have a lot of really fun interactions. But honestly, I really loved the DCEU's version of him, at least from his solo movies. Those movies are a lot of fun with a lot of sauce in the direction. The costume designs were incredible. And I actually don't think Jason Momoa gets enough credit for his Arthur Curry. So I would want to wait a little bit before trying him again and maybe go for something a little different. The next honorable mention is Mr. Terrific. I honestly think he's actually a given to be on the Justice League, at the very least in like a technical sense, but I would kind of rather they instead put him on the Terrifics, where he could get more of a spotlight as the leader. I mean, they've already confirmed like half of that team anyway, so it doesn't feel out of the question. The next honorable mention is Hawkgirl. I'm really excited for Isabella Merced in the role. She seems to really love the character, and I'm so glad that the Kendra Saunders version is going to be getting the spotlight. The DCAU made people think that Shayera Hall is the main version of Hawkgirl, when really she's Hawkwoman, like a totally different character. And so like it'll be cool to like clear that up a little bit. The same thing with Mr. Terrific. I actually think it's a given she's going to be a main Justice League member in the future. But I listen, I don't want to do beat for beat the animated show roster. This is a YouTube video. I have to be somewhat interesting, okay? I have to find the perfect middle ground between saying stuff that everybody agrees with and saying stuff that's just barely unique enough to make it worth the whole video. It's a very difficult balance. And the last honorable mention is Blue Beetle, because I love the character. Sholo is the chillest dude ever, and I want to see him get that paycheck. Jaime is probably a bit too young for the League itself. That could be a fun dynamic, but he would probably fit better on a Young Justice team or a Teen Titans type of project. I'm super excited for that animated series though. That's gonna be rad. And yes, I'm gonna milk my 30-second interaction for all it's worth, despite the fact that I was super awkward and uncomfortable, and just thinking about that day gives me horrible anxiety. I'm not built for events like that. All right, the last member that I want to talk about, and you're probably wondering where this character's been and why I waited so long to talk about him. I truly believe that this is the single most important character for these new movies to get right, and that's none other than the Flash. But more specifically, Wally West. Listen, I love Barry Allen. In all honesty, I'm probably Barry Allen's biggest defender. When that character is written right, as a dorky science geek who makes corny dad jokes and is just stuck in the Silver Age, he's a blast to read and I love him. But the problem is that he's basically never written that way. But Wally West is, and I don't like using the word objectively because objectivity doesn't exist in art because it's an inherently subjective medium, objectively a better character. And this is not a hot take. Writers have been taking aspects of Wally and giving them to Barry for the better part of 2 decades. The show even took his wife. Now that's just disrespectful. It's no secret that the Flash's reputation is a little bit in the mud right now. The show was great for what it was, but after the whole mess that was the movie with all of its rewrites and reshoots and crimes and what the fuck is that, I fully believe the Scarlet Speedster needs to be done proper justice and given the right treatment. And the best and easiest way to do that would be by shelving Barry for a little bit and finally giving Wally that spotlight he deserves. You could explain Wally as Flash in a million different ways. I think honestly it's for the best if we just jump straight to him, not erasing Barry's existence like the DCAU did, but instead just making it a part of his backstory. Because that aspect of Wally's life is really important to his character growth and what makes him special. In George Miller's Justice League Mortal, the plan was to have Barry Allen disappear at the end of that first movie and have Wally be the Flash moving forward. Or I think that could be the plot to an entire solo Flash movie in a similar vein to how Into the Spider-Verse handled it. It's what I wanted the last Flash movie to do. I did a whole pitch video, and honestly, you could just slap that into this new universe and everything would kind of fit fine. Like nothing would really change. I also think that Wally has a very particular role in the Justice League that not many other characters fill quite like him. Wally is the soul of the Justice League, where Superman is the beacon, Batman is the brains, Wonder Woman is the heart, and Green Arrow is the conscience. Wally is the person who brings them all together. He's the person who bridges the gap between generations, growing from Kid Flash to Titan to hero. He's effectively the future that characters like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are working so hard for. Every member has their part to play, but I think if you can get Wally West right, the rest of the Justice League and the DC universe at large will follow. Now, this roster is pretty safe. It's effectively just the animated series team with a couple of my favorites thrown in there, and I'm sure there will be people who want to see something more varied and a whole different roster of characters, which I totally get. I don't think the DCAU should be the be-all end-all for what the DCU should do, and I want it to form its own identity. But I also think a team like this does a good job of representing DC overall and showing the corners of the universe that we might not be as familiar with. And realistically, when it comes to a team as important as the Justice League, I don't think anybody's going to be 100% happy. Same reason I don't think anybody's going to be totally satisfied with the Teen Titans roster or the MCU's X-Men. There's just too many fan favorites to try and cram into one team for a movie series. And so I think the thing that matters the most to me is the creatives involved and the director vision. It's part of why I want to see George Miller come back and take another swing at this. Every glimpse that we've been seeing of the DCU, be it from set photos or teases for what's to come, has excited me at least in some way, which is huge compared to years and years of what felt like a rushed and poorly planned out attempt at a cinematic universe. The real key to the Justice League and the DCU is to learn from the past, to not try to rush to the finish line or copy beat for beat what worked for Marvel, but instead to have a love for the source material, an understanding for what makes it work, and the passion to do it justice. But what do you think? Let me know down below what team lineup you want to see from the DCU, and what do you think of what we're seeing from Superman so far? If you like this video, be sure to let the YouTube algorithm know and hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Ans, Anus425, Cabbage Boy, Cassidy, Carol Ann Brenneman, Chicken McDoofus, Cosmic Tragedy, Dan, Danny Boy, Eden Kenna, Egan McFarlane, Evan Bowers, Fastest Man Dead, Hannah C, Howard Bell, Iron Ninja, Jake Selig, Jonathan Young, Glass Bear Productions, Morpy, Murn09, Popcorn Eater 123, Sherbet, Spectacular Clyde, TDW Fan, Theo Crouch, Tim Neufeld, Trans Huntress, Troy Spy Razor's Lame, Tyler Goodrich, and Yash Kapoor for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. This has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.